Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Today's webinar is called Cyber Resilient Protection for the VM Reset Era. So thank you all for joining today. Today's webinar will last about an hour, and we'll have some time at the end for questions. So to start off, I'd like to introduce the attendees that we have today. So Jeff and Jonathan, feel free if you'd like to come on camera and introduce yourselves. I'll start. My name is Harris Schneiderman. I run this webinar series, and I'm pleased to be here today. I run the hybrid cloud practice for HPE in the Asia Pacific region. So great to be here today. Next, I'll go to Jeff. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending today's session. I'm the Cyber Resilience Sales Engineering Manager. So a lot of things around data protection, but helping customers recover environments after a cyber attack.
Awesome. Great to have you here, Jeff. Thanks for coming. And Jonathan, you want to go next?
Yep. And hello to you all. My name is Jonathan Vernick, and I'm part of the data services team working as a solution architect, more focused on the private and hybrid cloud solutions with the underpinning of our HVM and hypervisor solutions.
Great. Thanks, guys. It's great to have you both on the webinar today. We'll be hearing from them a little bit later. Just some quick housekeeping before we get started. There is the ability to ask questions during the webinar. There's a chat section and a Q&A section. Please put your questions in there. We'll have a chance towards the end for live questions, but feel free to ask your questions as we go, and we'll do our best to answer them. Anything we can't answer today, we'll make sure that we follow up with you. So make sure, I'm assuming you provided your contact details when you register. We'll use your name and we'll make sure that we follow up. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so here's the agenda that we're going to cover today. I'll start off with giving a little bit of an intro of what's going on in the virtualization industry and this whole great VM reset trend that we're talking about. And then I'll hand over to Jeff, and he can give us an update on Zerto, and specifically what we've done in Zerto 10.9, and how that can enhance our ability to protect, recover, and migrate workloads from VMware platforms to Morpheus VM Essentials. And then Jonathan will come in a little bit after that and tell us about some of the updates for the HPE SimpliVity and private cloud PC3000 platforms and how that works together with Zerto and Morpheus VM Essentials. Towards the end, I'll cover a few case studies, and we have some exciting promotional offers that we'd like to share with you at the end, so please stick around for that. Hopefully you enjoy it. All right, so I don't think it should be any surprise to anyone on this call about what's going on in the virtualization industry, specifically that the largest incumbent player, VMware, was acquired, and that's had some very significant implications on price increases for that virtualization layer. And for many customers, this is the trigger for them to consider an alternate virtualization platform, such as Morpheus VM Essentials and others. But there are other considerations that customers need to think about as well. It's not just about virtualization. Obviously, we have other workloads to think about now. We have Kubernetes-based workloads, we have cloud workloads, and of course we have AI workloads. And each of those workloads has their own specific needs and requirements. Many of them are also virtualized, but they have other considerations as well that customers need to think about. So, you can't just think about virtualization in a silo. When you're thinking about changing your virtualization platform, you have to think about all the different workloads that rely on that. And then finally, introducing any new tool, any new management console, puts a burden on the operations of the organization. It requires training, it requires teams to support it, and more tools and more consoles means more complexity. So this is the situation that our customers are facing today. Now, Gartner and HP and others have been following this trend for the last number of years, and we've seen significant movements of customers from VMware to alternate platforms, such as the ones you see here, Nutanix, Hyper-V, Red Hat OpenShift Virtualization, and HPE HVM have all seen, market share increases on the back of customers' exits from VMware. So we're already seeing significant movement in this market, and I'll be happy to share some examples with you a little bit later. But one of the key trends that we're seeing is this shift from a singular focus on one virtualization stack, i.e. VMware, to more of a multi-hypervisor approach. Customers are running multiple platforms. They're starting to use multiple hypervisors where it makes sense. And so the key thing for HPE is that we're a platform company, and so we partner with and support all of these different virtualization stacks, not just our own. And so we want to enable our customers to be able to run whichever virtualization stack they wish on whatever platform they wish. And to do that requires a really strong management capability, which is really what Morpheus is all about, as we'll talk about a little bit later. But today we're going to focus very extensively on platform migration. So in our last webinar, we talked about the activities and the planning and the work that goes in to how you perform a migration and the different tools available to do that. These are some of the considerations that customers think about, when it comes to migrating virtualized workloads. Obviously, they want to, minimize downtime. They want to minimize the impact to the end users and the applications that those end users depend on. Ideally, they don't want to have to reconfigure their environment significantly. If it's working well, they want to be able to transport that to a new virtualization stack and continue to work. Obviously, if they're moving away from VMware, it needs to be affordable. But most importantly, what customers ultimately want to do once the decision has been made to move is they want to be able to move as quickly as possible in a bulk migration fashion without impacting the end users. And today we're going to talk about a great platform that enables that, which is called HPE Zerto. So with that, I'd love to hand over to my friend Jeff to talk a little bit about the Zerto 10.9 update and the capabilities that provides.
Perfect. Thank you, Harris, for that great introduction. It's really exciting to be here today with everyone that's in attendance, because 10.9 is one of those releases that is got a lot of features that have been packed into it, specifically around how we're supporting our HVM hypervisor from an HPE perspective. So as it was mentioned, moving to a new platform can be challenging, but it's also about how do you keep your data and applications online. One of the questions that I like to ask my organizations and customers that I talk to is, how long can you afford to be offline? Last week, I was talking to a customer and they said it costs them roughly $100,000 per hour if they have an outage for their environment. Now you can see on the slide in front of you, this is an industry, the cost of downtime report from 2024, where it was estimated for organizations that it's roughly $300,000 per hour that it costs a particular average organization around the world. Your organization may be larger or smaller, but it's important to have an understanding of how do you get your organization and your applications back online rapidly, but also safely, ensuring that you're not just reintroducing different problems. So those migrations, those cyber resilience conversations really come to us from an HPE data protection and specifically from a Zerto perspective. So, being able to recover fast is important, but a lot of those traditional protection solutions out there are not necessarily enough. So let's take a look at what Zerto is and how that has evolved from a product. So Zerto's been around for a while. I'll call it the bread and butter of what Zerto does is disaster recovery. And when you're deploying enterprise class virtualization, you want to have the ability to do disaster recovery between your different locations. And so Zerto provides that across a wide range of hypervisors and clouds. You can see that across the bottom of your screen. Some of the different hypervisors, obviously, VMware has been there for a number of years, but we're very proud to have what we're doing with HPE's HVM product in the market. So disaster recovery, providing industry-leading RPOs and RTOs for organizations, but more commonly with the evolving cyber threats and the cyber threat landscape, AI out there is creating a an environment where we need to be able to make sure that we're looking at every avenue for protecting and creating a cyber resilience. So we're doing real-time detection of ransomware attacks for workloads that are protected by Zerto. And it's really exciting that we've brought that functionality to our Zerto plus HVM combination. The last pillar that's there is on this multi-cloud mobility. A lot of organizations are looking at what they'll call hybrid cloud or multi-cloud. And so Zerto gives the ability to move data both into cloud, out of cloud, or even cross-cloud, depending on their organization's needs. So important piece of flexibility is what Zerto's bringing to the marketplace in terms of protecting your data and being able to move it around. If you haven't seen Zerto before, how does it differ from what you may be doing today, protecting your environment? Okay. Traditionally, we had backups, and a lot of organizations that are deploying our backup partners, such as Cohesity, Commvault, and Veeam, they're doing backups once a day. And that may be okay for a certain set of applications. Not everything needs real-time replication, real-time detection in their environments. We also have the technology on our storage arrays, such as the B10000, where we can do snapshots. We can use immutable storage, and we're typically doing those types of workloads on a scheduled basis, 4 to 6 hours, and that's again for the next level of data protection for an environment. With Zerto, what we're doing is we're keeping a continuous data protection journal of the IOs that change on a set of application servers that are running those most critical workloads. When disaster hits, when ransomware attacks your environment, Zerto provides the ability to go back in time as granular as 5 to 15 seconds, allowing you to restart your applications and keep your business running. There's many more features to what Zerto does, but this is the historical amazing piece of what Zerto does to give you that best RPO in the world. That's a bold statement, but it's something that we like to back up. Now, when we start to look at not just singular server, but multiple servers, you have your application server, you have your web server, your database server, and a file server. They're all working together. Zerto has the ability to what we call a virtual protection group. And we're creating that same checkpoint and continuous journaling approach to all the VMs that are then working together. We maintain the right order of fidelity. You have a consistent restore point in the event that one or all of those application servers go offline. And you no longer have to worry about inconsistent backup windows where you might be backing up a database at 1 o'clock, backing up an application server at 2 o'clock, and creating potentially inconsistencies about how those things happen. Zerto is helping make your life easier and simpler by creating these checkpoints for these applications that you're really looking to protect. Now, as we move forward, part of this is that any good vendor or any good software will have multiple points of integration. With Zerto 10.9, we've actually created what we call our integration hub. Now, the integration hub, I feel, is a key differentiator because we realize that there's a lot of great products out there, namely Microsoft Defender. There's also CrowdStrike. And so when we look at those security applications, what we're really trying to do is help you as an organization create a detection and depth of defense architecture for your data. We've created APIs that allow us to talk directly to CrowdStrike and Defender, where if they notice or flag an anomaly in your organization, they'll tell Zerto to take a checkpoint and mark the last clean checkpoint. So they're working together hand in hand to help up-level your cyber defense and resiliency posture in your organization. Fastest time to response means limiting that blast radius for your organization. So I really like this, and we have got a lot of customers that are looking at and deploying this in their environments. A couple other important things that have been released in this 10.9 that was released in late May. The idea of recovery plans. Recovery plans are kind of like your run book. You want to have a structure about which critical VMs you want to recover first. Do you need to run any type of scripting mechanism with them? And then what's the next set of applications that you're looking to bring forward? The recovery plan puts these in documentation, and it creates the automation using Zerto. So these will create the customized order. You can move these around, and then you can go and do full-on disaster recovery testing using some of the failover testing mechanisms that's built into the product, making sure that your runbook works as you expect it. So when the time comes, you can run your recovery plan and get your organization back and running. With our Advanced Resilience Edition, you can actually mark it as a clean cyber checkpoint as well, giving you that extra speed and efficiency to knowing which set of data that you want to resume and recover from. A couple quick things that customers are asking for is, how do I size my Zerto environment? We offer and provide for organizations, when you have a Zerto license, you can connect to our analytics portal. This analytics portal will allow you to size things like your journal, how much your data is changing, how am I meeting my SLAs for various audit requirements, and generate a report that you can hand over to those organizations to prove out, I've tested my disaster recovery, I'm in compliance, and I'm meeting all these regulations that may be affecting our particular industry. So are we hitting SLAs? Do we have an RPO that's exceeding for some reason? This will all get driven out and shown in our analytics portal. And as we move forward, the last part of, there we go. It wouldn't be a technology topic without talking about something for AI. In Zerto 10.9, we've brought out two critical features, or I see them as great features, for what you can now do with Zerto as you're starting to manage your environment. The first one is we've integrated, and you can see in the top right corner of your slide, an AI assistant. That AI assistant, you can actually go in within the Zerto ZVM management interface and start typing your queries. Am I meeting my SLA? What's the definition of my virtual protection groups? And get a lot of different information about how your environment is running. You can also have it query the Zerto documentation. We've created this so that this LLM, this AI assistant, will go out and find information about error messages or best practices when setting up types of workloads, such as a database workload. Taking this a step further, we've introduced an MCP server. Now, if you've played around with any of the various LLMs that are out there, you can connect this MCP server to the LLM of your choice. Okay, so you can see a little screen grab here where it's got Claude Desktop that's running, and I've seen other examples where people are using things like OpenClaw, as well as various other coding, such as VS Code is another popular one that people are using. You have the choice as an administrator whether you want to turn on and use these functions. It will use either the built-in piece, or you can connect it to one that your organization works with. So very exciting from an AI perspective and what we're doing with Zerto to help you be more resilient. Now I'll turn it back to Harris quickly, just to give you a little bit of an update there.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I thought I'd take a little diversion and talk about some of the announcements that we made at Discover last week in Las Vegas around Morpheus. And what you'll see is a lot of these announcements are very relevant to the topic of migration and disaster recovery. So first and foremost, there is a new edition of Morpheus called Morpheus Advanced. So for those of you who attend this webcast, we've spoken about Morpheus VM Essentials, and we've spoken about Morpheus Enterprise, which you see there on the left and the right. Morpheus Advanced is our newest edition of Morpheus. And the reason why we have this 3-edition structure now is to make it easier for customers to transition away from VMware or a competitive virtualization product to our stack. And so we've tried to align our SKUs in terms of the capabilities that our competitors offer. So VM Essentials is really targeted to customers who have more basic VM management needs. They need, essentially a management console, and they need the ability to manage virtual machines. Morpheus Advanced has the capabilities of VM Essentials, but it also adds the ability to run Kubernetes-based workloads. Built into Morpheus, we have our own variant of Kubernetes called HKS, but it obviously has the ability to run other variants of Kubernetes as well. And Morpheus Advanced is really targeted to those customers running VMware VVF and Tanzu. And then finally, Morpheus Enterprise is designed for our larger customers and our managed services providers who need multi-tenancy, who need virtualization and Kubernetes, who need to manage multiple hypervisors and multiple public clouds. All the capabilities for that are built into Morpheus Enterprise. If there's interest amongst this group, I've been thinking about doing an updated webinar on the different editions of Morpheus and doing a bit of a deeper dive. So if that's of interest, please let us know in the chat. Okay. Now, the other exciting announcement at Discover was the release of Morpheus 9. And Morpheus 9 has a number of great capabilities that customers have been requesting. You can see a subset of those here. So first of all, we now support stretch clustering for HVM-based clusters. So you can have a single cluster that spans 2 geographic locations, and you can enable replication between them. We also released our integration with Zerto and Veeam. Obviously, that Zerto integration is really important so that you can now use Zerto and Morpheus together. In addition, Morpheus has different ways that you can interact with it. So some users of Morpheus are very comfortable writing code and they like to interface with Morpheus that way. And other users and administrators prefer not to write code. And so we have introduced a new visual workflow builder that allows you to build workflows in Morpheus via drag and drop without having to write any code. And then finally, we announced a cloud-based management console for Morpheus called Morpheus Central. And this is useful in the event that you have multiple instances of Morpheus, which is very common as a large customer. And Morpheus Central gives you a centralized place to be able to view and manage those instances from anywhere. So those are some very high-level announcements from Discover about Morpheus. And again, happy to do a deeper dive for folks in the future, but I thought that would be a good introduction. And now I'll hand back to Jeff, and he can talk about some of the cross-platform migration, protection, and recovery capabilities that you get now that Morpheus and Zerto work so well together.
Perfect. Thank you, Harrison. For everyone that's on this webinar, without a doubt, that's a hot topic of how do you migrate, and this is the #1 question that I get almost daily about what are we doing to help customers and organizations migrate from their existing platforms into HVM and HPE Morpheus. So 10.9 really brought the next generation of what we can do from a support perspective. And so, Harris, I'll get you to just move the slide ahead. Thank you. So it is an important cog in the wheel that helps us turn over and get to that next iteration of the great VM reset strategy that we've been talking about. I've mentioned the things like the agentic AI, the Microsoft Defender, the recovery plans, and really one of the biggest features that organizations and even our own team members were looking for was how do we enhance and provide for an option for migrating data. And so when we start to look at the basic architecture of what Zerto looks like, it's really a traditional in terms of what we've done before with whether it was Hyper-V, whether it was VMware. And really, when we start to deploy it as we move forward, Harris, apologies, folks. There we go. When you deploy Zerto in a traditional environment for organizations, you have a primary protected site. Think of that as your production site. We have our VME manager that's managing the entire infrastructure and hosts that are running there. In that Morpheus or HVM environment, we'll deploy a ZVM. That's the Zerto Virtual Manager, and that's that web-based interface. You've seen a few screenshots that are there. The Zerto Virtual Manager is kind of the traffic cop. It's managing how the replication is performed and where it's replicating to. On those VME hosts, you'll notice a green box there that says VRA. The VRA is the Virtual Replication Adapter. That's actually getting a copy of the IOs and creating that journal and sending it every 5 seconds to its partner VRA at your recovery site. That recovery site has a baseline replica of your volume, and it has your journal. Okay. Think of that baseline replica as the foundational piece of your volume. If your guest has a 100 gigabyte disk, it's going to need a 100 gigabyte replica at the target site that you're going to store. The journal is what you get to define in terms of how long and how granular do I want my IO and checkpoints to be. We can be as low as 1 hour. We can be as long as 30 days in that compressed journal. Generally, when customers or organizations ask, what do we recommend? It's in that 5 to 7 days. And the reason for that is it's around what's the typical dwell time for a CVE that might exist in your environment. It's typically 3 to 4 days. So you want to be able to potentially go back in time ahead of that. Now you notice a couple other blocks there. There's the QEMU driver. That allows the ZVM to talk to the actual guest operating systems. So that is one of the prerequisites for how Zerto talks to these VMs. So the environment gives you a very well protected and recovery site. This example shows a one-way. With Zerto, we can support bidirectional, so you could easily have VMs running at both sites. Now, let's take a look at probably why many of you are here today is to look at what are we doing from VMware moving to HVM. You can see in the diagram looks the exact same. The concepts are identical. We've got our vCenter with a ZVM deployed and the VRA deployed. Those VRAs are deployed on each of those ESX hosts. So if you have a 5-node cluster, there's 5 VRAs that get deployed in that environment. Those are then managing that replication, same as that 5-second continuous replication that's moving information from the production site into this new site that you're migrating into. The VRA is still paired. We're creating our replica and we're creating our journal. We are doing this information all on the fly. We're still doing the real-time detection for ransomware. One of the biggest things that actual customers are coming to us for is this ability to do non-disruptive testing. So imagine you're running your environment, production VMware, you've been tasked to migrate to a new platform. How do you make sure it's going to work as you need it? Zerto has the built-in capabilities to allow you to do non-disruptive testing in that target site, in that new environment. And so it's really creating an amazing way to lower your risk about the movement from one platform to another. And at this point, I'm going to get Harris to play a very short video to show you this actual process. And we'll make sure we share the audio.
Yep, 1 second. Okay.
Virtualization costs are rising. Platform lock-in is real, and moving hypervisors without disrupting critical applications is a genuine risk. Re-platform your virtualized workloads across hybrid environments without stress with HPE Zerto software and HPE Morpheus software. HPE Zerto delivers risk-free workload migration with downtime measured in minutes. Migrations can be tested without disrupting production, providing confidence for final cutover. After migration, HPE Zerto Continuous Data Protection can keep workloads online with recovery points measured in seconds and recovery time in minutes, while HPE Morpheus simplifies workload orchestration, giving teams the flexibility to modernize on their own terms without sacrificing resilience. You get real-time cross-platform migration between VMware and HPE Morpheus, non-disrupted testing and reporting of your automated migration or recovery workflow. And after you've migrated, you can protect and recover using granular checkpoints, so you know you're restoring clean data. The result is greater control, lower migration risk, and the freedom to change hypervisors whenever the business demands it. Learn more at hpe.com. Virtualization costs are rising.
All right. So as you can see from that very short, I'll call it a marketing video. If you're interested in seeing a more detailed video, yeah, myself and my team, we have some different lab environments where we can actually show that to you. But let's get a little bit more into some of the nuts and bolts of how this migration works. So the first part is understanding what's possible. Where are we in this journey to release Zerto and supporting Morpheus? So the beauty of it is you can see a lot of green dots on both with the 10.9 release in terms of what we're doing with Morpheus in terms of support, as well as from a VMware perspective. So we have the ability to do that continuous data protection with that journal. That's the exact same. The failover live, that's where customers have a disaster recovery event and they need to move to that secondary site because they've got some type of outage. The reverse protection, we all know that disaster recovery and migrations may be a failover or a failback type of workload. And so that reverse protection allows us to have true DR capability that enterprises are expecting today. The failover testing, the ransomware detection, those are all key things that are built into the 10.9 product. And you'll notice that there's a migration workflow. Right now, the first platform that we're supporting for migrations from a hypervisor into a HVM is when VMware is the source. We will look at how that evolves and the need, but this was the first requirement that we had from a developer perspective is how do we move VMware workloads into HVM? And that support is there today. So both from a disaster recovery perspective and from a move or a migration type of capability. Now, what are some of the actual requirements? If you have a little bit of an understanding of some of the code levels, or if you've used Zerto before, here's a snapshot of where I like to direct customers. It's important to note, always consult the online interoperability matrix. But what I'm recommending for organizations is that Zerto 10.9, Ubuntu 24.04 as the base operating environment for your HVM version. And then you can start to see some of the requirements for the ZVM management console, as well as the virtual replication adapter. The beauty of what we're doing with HVM, we create a service plan during the install. So a lot of this work under the covers is already done for you when you start to deploy it. In the green box on the right-hand side, you'll notice that we've added in support now for PC 3000 or PCBE. And that's certified now and tested as a version 8.1.2, which was released during the first week of June. So that support is there. And we're really, really excited for that because we've had another number of customers looking to make that transition from VMware into into PCB environments. So we'll move forward into a little bit more of the, I'll call it the nuts and bolts. And when we start to look at what's really possible with Zerto, why are customers looking at Zerto 10.9 for this migration? Okay, it's an important question to ask. There's a lot of different tools out there, some free, some have a fee associated with them. From a Zerto perspective, we're providing you a cross-platform real-time replication application for this migration, providing the ability to move. Where we feel it's best in your environments is when you're looking for a zero data loss, okay? Because what happens in this workflow is we'll actually shut down the VM at the when you pick the appropriate time, and we'll do a final checkpoint, and that becomes your starting point in that HVM environment. So if you need to have disaster recovery in conjunction with your existing platforms, and you want to do protection and testing while you're doing your migrations, a lot of flexibility. When is it maybe not the right time from a Zerto perspective? If you've migrated to version 9, there's limitations around what Broadcom allows us to do from a technology piece. It's not a technical limitation, it's a licensing restriction. So if you are on vSphere 9, bear with us as we look at how we evaluate that down the road. The other part is if you have development and test VMs, you may or may not feel that you need to do a zero downtime or a near zero downtime migration. And so they may not be the right ones to make that move. So generally, as you can see across the bottom, if you've got a vSphere environment, 6.7, version 7, or version 8, that can easily leverage Zerto 10.9 to move into your HVM environment. I'll drill down just a little bit further on the actual process, and it really can be divided into 3 different sections. You've got to prepare your guest VMs. You need to then replicate them. You want to do some testing. And then at a final stage, you're going to do a cutover where you're going to move the actual VM and commit it to that HVM environment when you're doing a migration. When we look at the preparing part, like any guest operating system running on any hypervisor, there's device drivers that are required. It's the VirtIO drivers and the QM agents. Okay, getting those installed is part of your baseline preparation for doing this migration process. So let's give you a little bit of an idea of what this looks like and why Zerto provides so much value for organizations. You've got your replication that's running. You can see your source. Let's imagine that that's our ESX environment. Applications and data is running. We've got Zerto running. It's replicating the data to the secondary target. That target site is running HVM. You can see our volumes that are there and the data that's there. What happens is when we click the animation, it will start to finalize. There we go. It'll finalize that last clean checkpoint. And when we bring it up for testing purposes, we can put it into that isolated bubble network. Your application owners can go in and access all the particular VMs and make sure that everything's working as expected. Nothing's been committed. We haven't finalized anything here at this stage. This is VMs that are running. Really imagine it on a separate IP network with separate IP addresses so you can validate that it's working. You're doing this a lot of times ahead of your migration process. Once you're happy with this, we move on to the commit stage. This is where we've done all of our testing. We want to promote these guest VMs into being our production network, and then we're technically reverse replicating our data if we need to. And we would suggest and advise that we're reverse replicating that into your secondary now HVM environment. We've committed our migration. We've made all the magic happen. We've done all of our testing. Most organizations will want to have the same platform hypervisor on the production and DR, so they can easily move workloads back and forth. The ability to do disaster recovery between VMware and HVM exists, but I personally don't see that as a long-term deployment for many of the organizations that I talk to. So we've made our commitment, we've made our move, and now we make sure that we're protecting all that data. A common question that I also get is about, if I've got my information, how do I make sure that I'm not exposing my organization to a potential failure while this migration is happening? You can see we've got our protected site, which is starting out as our VMware environment. And we want to replicate VM1 over to our recovery site. That's our traditional VMware deployment that's there. And that continues to run. Zerto supports a many-to-one environment or relationship where I can have that virtual protection group continue to operate. I can take that same VM and replicate it to now that HVM Morpheus environment and allow me to do all my failover and testing. This is all non-disruptive to my primary workloads. And so again, once I'm happy with that, I can then disassociate or cancel off that VPG1 and stop that replication, and we move forward, right? So here's a bit of a, I believe this, between the combination of the ability to test, the ability to do those seamless migrations and not interrupt your current operations, creates a large opportunity to really lower your business risk, as the video sort of mentioned. So the next slide gives us a quick view on some of the various device drivers required. This would be standard. You can see the protected platforms on the left, the recovery platform, what's the operating system. These are the most common operating systems that we see, and some of the functionality that customers and organizations are looking for. So this is all documented on our Zerto support pages. I'd encourage you to take a look at those or reach out to any of your HPE team members.
Thank you, Jeff. And then for this next part, we're really going to try to tie this in to our private cloud and hybrid offerings and strategy. So with that, if we can go to the next slide, please, Harris. So I think it would be just important to start with, under the private/hybrid cloud pillars, we recently had some naming conventions. The reason why this is important and why I want to bring this up is to ensure moving forward, we don't get confused with the HPE's latest material that has been circulating so far. So within the private/hybrid cloud, encompasses our hyper-converged and also our disaggregated hyper-converged offerings, which some of you may know as HCI and DHCI offerings, which is all underpinned with VMware, but now most recently as well with VM Essentials, which we'll actually talk further in the next slides. But for this slide, I just wanted to note that, Private Cloud Business Edition, which is short for PCBE, has now been renamed to SimpliVity PC1000. And then if we move along, we have PCB for Electro Storage MP, which is also, people would call it our disaggregated hybrid converged infrastructure, which is also known for short for DHCI, has now been formally renamed as Private Cloud PC3000. And then for our private cloud turnkey solution, which was called Private Cloud Enterprise, is now called HPE Private Cloud PC7000. Today, we'll be focusing more on the PC1000 and the PC3000. So for a quick overview, our SimpliVity PC1000 nodes has storage and compute combined together. So with that in mind, it has allowed for simple deployment, setting up, configuration, and allows for scale in a compact manner with all the nodes having compute and storage bundled together. For our private cloud PC 3000, it is disaggregated in nature, so DHCI or disaggregated hyperconverged infrastructure, where we can scale our compute and storage independently of one another, which is now backed with our 100% uptime Alletra Storage MP B10000 and our Gen 12 servers. Where it makes sense from a deployment perspective, DHCI is more connected to the core data center, and SimpliVity is more beneficial where we're restricted on site or space, where that would be our edge sites where space may be limited. So if we take for an example, recently been working with a logistic company. They have their core data center, which has a PC 3000, and then the edge processing sites has SimpliVity PC 1000, where space is limited, to ensure that they get that flexibility within their environment. In terms of what this means, with the recent change of our virtualization stack from SimpliVity, from VMware to VM Essentials, I thought it would be good to showcase in our next slide. So with SimpliVity today, we have our built-in data protection and fast VM backups, which helps keep our environment running with minimal disruptions and high availability with just 2 nodes, while RAID also supports that disk level resiliency. So with the introduction of VM Essentials on SimpliVity compared to VMware, you'll see across those 2 tables, there's not much of a difference. The first difference we see is the hypervisor change, where we had VMware and now we have VM Essentials. You also see there's a management change with enhanced functionality of today, where we can have VM Essentials not only run our VM Essentials or HVM hypervisor, but also VMware as well, all managed through that one management GUI that you'd be familiar with today as well. All this is then being with all this can be managed through a central interface, also known as our Data Services Cloud Console, which is part of our GreenLake Cloud Platform management interface, which can be accessed online through a URL link, and then this can be found under the PCBE tile. If you look at what having an online GUI or management allows for this, so if we go back to the logistics company or to an environment that is distributed across states, with a primary and DR state, but not even across states, it could be even 10 to 20 kilometers apart. We can access and manage it through that one GreenLake platform without the need to be physically there to manage the environment. The platform itself also has inbuilt security features such as the access to the least privilege. We can track user activity logs for compliancy. We can implement multi-factor authentication and so on. So we just touched on PC 3000, PC 1000, and I thought it would be great just to tie this all together now. So if we have a look across the 2 sites, we have site A and site B, both underlying are both infrastructure or the underlying infrastructure of PC 3000. So that's our DHCI offering, where we have our Alletra Storage MP B10000 as our underlying storage, a compute host as the compute layer. And then we can implement now with the latest releases of, with the whole management interface being HVM or VM Essentials, we can now complement that with our DR capability, which is Zerto. So to allow for Zerto to run smoothly, we've got our ZVM, which Jeff also touched on or alluded earlier, which is essentially the brains, which is handling our day-to-day operations, such as like a protection, replication, and failover. And then we've got our VRAs that do that heavy lifting, allowing for that data movement between the 2 sites. So, I think it would be good to wrap it up, in a couple nice summarized way. We can say that today for PC 3000, which is managed through underlying virtualization stack, which is HVM, we can have a replication with a VME to VME site, but also that cross-site replication if you're running VMware and VME today. So where you can provide protection in both directions, and also allow for that DR site not to sit idle and run active workloads between the 2 sites, which is highly advantageous, which is what Zerto can provide today with the PC 3000 stack. And Harris will take us through of the case studies and the promotional offers.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think for the sake of time today, because I want to allow some time for people to ask live questions, I'll leave the case studies in the handout, but I'll jump into the promotional offers just to wrap up, because I think they're really relevant. So for those of you who've been following the announcements from Discover, we had the announcement of a few really exciting and relevant offers that I wanted to share with you today. These offers are available, so if you have any questions about how to take advantage of them, please contact me, okay? So the first one is what we call our VME Migration Advantage offer, okay? And this is meant to address the issue that a lot of customers have, which is that typically if you're going to change your virtualization stack, it's not something you just wake up on the day and decide to do. There's usually a lot of planning involved. And in fact, some customers plan up to a year in advance around their migration, right? And that's a totally reasonable thing to do. But the challenge that presents is then often our customers will say, well, now I've got to pay for VMware and I have to pay for Morpheus VM Essentials in that transition year. And that just makes, a challenging budgetary situation even worse. And so what we've done is we've said, hey, as a customer, if you make a 3-year commitment to VM Essentials, we will give you the first year free. Okay, so you're committing to 3 years, but you're getting the first year free, and so you can use that year of no cost VM Essentials to cover that year of transition out of VMware. And then when that first year's ended and your migration is complete, then you can start paying for VM Essentials. The great part is because VM Essentials is so much cheaper, you're going to have a savings in every year subsequently that's going to be substantial. But really the goal of this offer is to help, ease the pain of having to pay that VMware bill for 1 more year. Okay. The second offer, which you can combine, of course, is a Zerto onboarding offer. And obviously, as you've heard today, Zerto is a fantastic product to provide disaster recovery as well as protection against cryptographic attacks. But it's also a fantastic migration tool. And for those customers who want to use Zerto specifically for migration, we're offering you a fantastic deal where you can get 25 Zerto VM licenses for the low price of $1 for 1 year. And really the intention of this offer is to help you use Zerto as your migration tool to move from VMware to HVM. And you're really not going to find a better offer than $1 a year for Zerto. It's a fantastic deal. So I would encourage all of you, whether you're a customer or a partner, to think about these offers in the context of your own situation. And if they would be beneficial, please let us know so that we can assist you. Okay? So with that, I'll open it up for questions. I want to say a big thank you for attending the webinar. People have been asking questions throughout, so thank you for doing that. And some of them have been answered. But what I thought I'd do is give people an opportunity. If you'd like to ask a live question, let me know and I can take you off mute. But I can also read some questions here from the chat. So let me address a few of these. So the first one was there was some questions about announcements at Discover and what's going to be sold via the channel and what's not. We don't really have time to cover that today, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that, but I will do a session on post-Discover updates, and so I'll make sure that we cover that announcement and a series of others very shortly. But I'm glad to hear there's interest in that, and I will make sure that we cover it. There was a question here from one of my colleagues. Is it possible to use Zerto to replicate between a PC 3000 environment and a PC 1000 environment with SimpliVity? So Jeff or Jonathan, when you want to come off mute and see if we can address that question?
Sure. Sorry, let me turn my camera on here. When we start looking at the possibilities of replication, it is slightly dependent on which hypervisors are running in your current environment and where you're moving to. In the context of HVM, today, Zerto does not have support for PC 1000 and HVM and Zerto 10.9. That is something that's being worked on for later this year. We have to have some prerequisites that are just not there yet. As I put in the chat, if you maybe had an existing PC 1000 environment or the SimpliVity environment that was running on VMware and you wanted to move to HVM on PC 3000, then we can absolutely do that type of replication. So it depends on your situation as to what's possible.
Thanks, Jeff. There was a second question asked in the chat that I'll address, and it's specifically about this VME Migration Advantage offer. Okay, so the question was, well, if I buy VME for 3 years, okay, the standard way that, if you purchase VME for, a 3-year term, the standard way that you pay for that is you pay for all 3 years up front. And so the question is, well, if I'm paying for all 3 years up front, then how does that really help me with that free for the first year? So I think that's a really good question, and I wanted to make sure I address that. So the premise of the question is correct. When you buy VM Essentials on a term license, whether that's a 1-year, 3-year, or 5-year term, which we all offer, the standard way is that you pay up front. So if you do a 3-year, you're paying for 3 years up front, 5 years, so on and so forth. Okay, that's absolutely true. However, we do have an offer through our HPE FS team for 0% financing. So rather than paying up front, you can pay over the term. So instead of paying upfront for 3 years, you could make one payment a month for 36 months. So we can spread that payment out. And then if you combine that with the VME Migration Advantage offer, we could make the payments in year 1 0. Okay, and so that way, as a customer, I'm modifying, the cash flows so that I'm only really making a payment in years 2 and years 3. So that's the way that you can achieve that if paying in that first year is problematic for your customer because they're also paying for VMware at the same time. So I hope that addresses the question. And I'm also considering doing another webinar on our financing offer as well. If we want to get a little bit deeper in that, if people have an interest, please put that in the chat because I think that's a good topic. And we can also talk about buying back old hardware and things like that as well in that session. Okay. Now, good question here. Is the VME Migration Advantage licensing only available for a standalone purchase, or could it also be available when VM Essentials is bundled? That's a great question. The answer is yes, it does count if you have VME bundled into a larger solution like PC 3000 or PC 1000 or even PC 7000. So yes, absolutely, we can extend that offer even if you're buying it in a bundle, but obviously you need to meet the commitments of 3 years. Now, if you're buying hardware, chances are you're going to have that over a 3-year term or longer, so that shouldn't be a problem. So absolutely, you can combine those offers. Okay. Well, guys, I really appreciate the questions today. There's been a really some great engagement from the audience, so thank you for that. I hope we've had a chance to get through all the questions today. If I've missed any, or if you have follow-ups based upon what we said, again, feel free to post another question in the chat or come off mute. In terms of the wrap-ups and logistics for today, this session has been recorded. I will make that recording available to folks after the session. So once you drop off the webinar, I'll generate the recording and I'll post it, and I'll provide the link in the chat. I'll also be happy to provide the slides as well if people would like a copy of those. And as always, please keep the feedback coming and let us know what you'd like to see on future webinars because we really appreciate your engagement. And we do these sessions for you. We want to make sure that we're choosing topics that are relevant for you. If we're not covering things that you want to hear about, let us know. A big thanks to Jeff and Jonathan today for being our guest presenters. It was great to have you. We'd love to have you back again. And a big thank you to everyone for attending today. Everyone have a great rest of your week, and thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.